This video is sponsored by Dev Mountain. If you're interested in learning web development, iOS, or UX design, Dev Mountain is a 12-week design and development bootcamp intended to get you a full-time position in the industry. To learn more, visit devmountain.com or click the link in the description below. Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to Exploring Docker. So this is going to be at least 2 videos because in this video I want to kind of just introduce Docker, talk about what it is. We're going to look at different commands to create containers, talk about images and Docker Hub, and look at a very simple Dockerfile, stuff like that. And then in the next video I actually want to do something practical where we take a Node.js and MongoDB application, something very simple, and create what's called a Docker compose file so that we can use multiple containers. So we can have one for our MongoDB database and then one for our Node application, and basically have those work together. And then we're going to bring it onto a DigitalOcean droplet and run it in containers on that in that droplet. Okay, so the core aspect of Docker, the point of it is to run software services or software programs, application environments inside of containers. So things like, let's say Nginx, which is a web server, or Apache, or MySQL, or MongoDB, or even like WordPress or Drupal. You can run these things inside of containers that are separate from your operating system, separate from your whole local machine environment. So instead of having to, build an app on one machine and then having to try to mimic that environment on another machine, especially if it's a different operating system, you might not even, you might have to install things differently, and it just becomes a pain. And Docker completely gets rid of that because you can simply run it in a container and it's going to be the same no matter what machine you run it on, whether it's Mac, Linux, Windows, doesn't matter the version of the operating system or anything like that. And you may think that Docker is just like another virtual machine, but I want to just show you an image real quick comparing something like VMware or Hypervisor to Docker and show you how it's different. So basically with VMware, you have your host machine or your server where you run multiple virtual machines, and each virtual machine has its own full-blown operating system. Each one has its own kernel, and then you're running your apps on top of those operating systems. With Docker, however, we have our server or host machine. We have one operating system. It could be Windows, Mac, or Linux, and you just have these tiny containers that run, which are basically nothing but processes that run on your machine. And they all share a kernel. It's not like they all have their own kernel, even though they have mini Linux distributions like Debian or Alpine or something like that. They're much lighter, so there's much less overhead, and they're very easy to port to other machines and very easy to deploy. All right, so Docker is a much better solution than doing it this way, and you'll find out if you're looking for jobs with large companies like Google and Amazon and all these companies, they're moving more towards containerization, and at least some part of their infrastructure is going to be using Docker and going to be using containers. So it is a technology that I would suggest learning. Even if you're a developer and you're not into DevOps, you should at least know the basics. And I'm definitely not an expert. I'm looking at it from a developer's point of view, and just to be able to move my applications around and test them from other machines and stuff like that, rather than deploying. Although we will be doing a little bit of deployment with DigitalOcean in the next video. All right, so let's go ahead and get started now. First thing you want to do is go to docker.com and go to get started. And I'm not going to do the actual installation because it's very self-explanatory. I already have Docker installed. But you would go to download for Mac or download for Windows, or use your package manager if you're on Linux. And you need to actually create an account with docker.com. You can see I'm logged in here. And one thing I want to mention is if you're on a system that's older than Mac OS Yosemite 10.10.3 or something older than Windows 10, like let's say Windows 8 or Windows 7, I think even Windows Home Edition it counts as well. If you have those systems, one of those operating systems, you need to use the Docker toolbox instead of Docker for Windows or Docker for Mac. And it's just a legacy desktop solution, but you can do all the same stuff that you can do with the newer version. All right, so just go ahead and download it, install it like any other software, just click next, and once it's all set up, you'll have the little whale icon. It'll be in the top right on a Mac or bottom right on a Windows machine, and you'll probably just have to log in with your Docker account, and you should be all set. All right, so once you do that, you can open up a terminal or a command line and just go ahead and type in Docker, and you should see all of the commands. Okay, and these management commands here are basically like sub commands. So when you do things with containers, you'll do like Docker container and then the command. So like ls will list all your containers, or Docker image build or something like that. So these are kind of like sub commands, and you'll find that out along the way. All right, so let's clear this up and let's go ahead and run Docker version. Okay, we're going to run a couple commands just to kind of get you familiar with it. So the server is the Docker engine that runs in the background, and then the client is what you're using to communicate with that engine. And it shows you the versions and all that stuff. Docker is actually built on the Go programming language, so it shows you the version of Go, stuff like that. It shows you your the architecture. The engine is going to say Linux, and then the client is, for me, Darwin, which is Mac. All right, so let's do Docker info. So this will give you a bunch of information. If we go to the top here, you'll see it'll show you the number of containers on your system, the number running. I actually cleared everything out for this tutorial, so I have no images on my machine, and I'll talk about images in a few minutes. No containers running, anything like that. All right, so let's create our first container. So I want to create an Nginx container, and if you don't know what Nginx is, it's a very common web server. It's similar to Apache. So when we install, or actually let's just create it first. So we'll say Docker container. Remember these management commands. So, and it has a this management command has a subcommand called run. So Docker container run. I'm going to add the -it flag, which is basically interactive mode. I want this to run in the foreground rather than in the background. All right, so we'll say Docker run it. Then we want to add a publish flag. So you can either do -- publish, but most people do just -p because it's shorter. And then you want to map the ports. So the first port is the port that you want to use on your local machine. So I'm just going to use 80, which is actually the default port for Nginx, which would be the second one. Okay, the second port is what is exposed from the container. And with Nginx, it's port 80. With Apache, it's port 80. For instance, MySQL would be 3306. That's the default port for MySQL. But you can map it to whatever port you want on your system. Okay, this could be anything, but you want to make sure this is 80 if you're using Nginx. And then lastly, we want to just put the name of the image, which is Nginx. Okay, so notice that it says unable to find image. Nginx latest. Latest is just the tag that it's using, which is the latest version. So what it does, if it can't find it on your machine locally, is it goes to Docker Hub, which is basically kind of like the GitHub of Docker images, and it pulls it down. Okay, you can see pull complete, and it does what it does, and now it's actually running the container. And if I were to now go to my local host on port 80, and 80 is the default, I don't have to do like :80 like that, just local host, and I'm running Nginx. And this is running in a container. It's not installed on my machine. It's nowhere on my machine. It's inside the container. And since I ran this in interactive mode in the foreground, it's going to show me logs. Every time I reload, you'll see the logs show up. Okay. Now, to give you a better idea of what images are and where they come from, let's go to hub.docker.com. And if we search for Nginx, you can search for anything, but we're going to search for Nginx, you'll see there's an official image. Okay, so that's what we used because we said container run Nginx, and that's the name of the official image. These other ones are actually third-party images that use the image, but then they add stuff onto it. So Nginx proxy, this one down here is Nginx with PHP, and you can use these images as well, but this is the actual base official image. And you can see the number of stars it has and the number of polls. The official image always, well, in all the cases that I've seen, has the most stars and polls. So let's go ahead and click on this, and this gives us a bunch of information. It's kind of like a GitHub page with the documentation, and we could pull this image from Docker Hub with this command here, although when we create a container it does it automatically. Okay, pull complete, so it actually did this in the background. Now over here you can see the different tags, so different versions and stuff like that, and you can actually check out the Dockerfile of this Nginx image. And notice that it comes from is just a way of extending another image, and it comes from Debian. Okay, Debian is a Linux distribution, and Stretch Slim is the version of Debian that it's using. Okay, so that's basically the environment that Nginx is running in. And then all this other stuff just kind of installs it, sets all the configuration, does a whole bunch of crap for us to get Nginx up and running. All right, that's the Docker file. And we can create our own Docker files, which we'll do later on. Now this Docker Hub page is going to have any information that you need. This gives you an example of how to run it. It shows you the port that you need to use, which is 80. It'll show you like an example of a Docker compose file, which we haven't gotten into, but we will probably in the next video. If there's any environment variables that you need to know, like MySQL, for example, you need to have an environment variable for a root password. That will be here as well. So you're going to be, when you're working with Docker, you're going to be coming to Docker Hub quite a bit to find out information, just like you would with GitHub and source code. All right, so hopefully that makes sense, guys. We're going to go back over here and stop this with Control-C. Okay, now if we do a Docker, let me actually clear this out first. So if we do a Docker container ls, I'm sorry, what the heck? Docker container ls. This will show us our running containers, okay? Containers that are running. Now, since the Nginx was ran in interactive mode, when we did Control-C, it stopped it. But we can do Docker container ls-a, and that shows us all of the containers on our system, whether they're running or not. Okay, and you can see here exited 35 seconds ago. Shows us when it was created, shows us the image name, it has an ID. Every container has a specific ID. It also has a name, and you can add your own names, which I'll show you in a few minutes, but if you don't, it just gives you some strange name like this. And I actually read that these names come from, they're two things. It's an adjective and then the name of a famous hacker or scientist. That's actually what these names are. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete or remove this image. So I'm going to say Docker, not image, container, I'm sorry. So Docker container and RM, and then you can put the ID. Now you don't have to put the whole ID. I'll just do the first three characters, which is 95A, and enter. And now if I do a Docker container ls-a, you can see we have no more containers. Now remember that when I ran the container, it pulled the image down. So if you want to look at your images that are on your machine, you can say Docker images. And the Nginx image is still going to be there. Even though we deleted the container, the image is still on our system. So the next time we run a container for Nginx, it'll be on our system and it'll happen faster. Okay, but you can delete these as well. So if I want to do Docker image RM and then the ID 682, now that should have deleted it. So if I do Docker images, now it's gone. So the next time I create a container, it'll have to once again pull it down from Docker Hub. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. But I can also pull it down myself by saying Docker pull Nginx. Actually, I should have did, oh no, that should be fine. Yeah, Nginx latest is the default. So now if I do Docker Docker images. Okay, so now Nginx is back. Okay, so it didn't create a container, it just pulled the image down onto our system. So now let's run Nginx in the background instead. So we're going to do Docker container and we're going to use a -D, and this stands for detached, okay, which is going to run it in the background. You could also do -- detach if you want. And then we're going to map a port. Let's do 8080 on our local machine, and of course 80 for the container. That's what it exposes. And then let's see what else. Let's add a name as well. So we'll do -- name, and I'll call this my Nginx, and then the last parameter is going to be the image name itself, which is Nginx. Oops, what did I do wrong here? I forgot run. So Docker container run. All right, so notice that it didn't clog up our console, but if we look at Docker container ls, you can see Nginx is running, okay, and it gives us all the information, the ID, shows us the ports, and so on. Another command I want to show you is container ps, which you might see, Docker container ps, which you might see in other tutorials, because this was kind of the older way to show your containers. You can also add the -A flag to show the ones that are not running. But you might see me do that as well, just because it's a little shorter than container ls. Whoops, I'm sorry, I'm an idiot. It's not container ps, although that does work, but you can just do Docker ps. That's what I meant to do, because this is a lot shorter than doing that. I didn't even know you could do Docker container ps actually. Anyways, let's go ahead and let's create an Apache container. So we'll say Docker container run, and if we look up Apache on Docker Hub, you'll see that the official build is actually called HTTPD. Okay, so we want to do run. Let's do -D for detached. For our port, let's do 8081, because we have Nginx on port 8080, which I didn't even show you. I guess I should show you that. So 8080, that's Nginx. So we want 8081 mapped to port 80, because Apache also uses port 80. And then let's go ahead and name it, and we'll call it my Apache. And we want HTTPD, which is the name of the image, which we don't have on our machine, so it should pull it down. Okay, so you can see it's downloading the image. All right, so now that should be running. If we do Docker ps, you'll see both Apache and Nginx. They're running on separate ports. So if we go to 8081, we get our Apache landing page, which is just this it works page. All right, so that's how we can run these things in separate environments. Now I want to give you an example of an environment variable. So let's go to Docker Hub and search for MySQL. So we'll go to the official MySQL, and if we go down, it should show us the environment variables. Right here. So environment variables, so you can use MySQL root password and actually define your password. You can choose to allow empty passwords. You can choose to create a random password. If you do that, you can then do container log, and it'll show you the password that was set in the logs. But what I would use is just set the password with MySQL root password. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's say Docker container run, and we'll do -D for detached. For the ports, MySQL runs on 3306, so we'll map that to 3306, and let's give it a name. We'll just give it a name of MySQL. And for our environmental variable, we want to do --env, and then the variable, which is going to be MySQL _ root _ password, and we want to set that to whatever. And then the name of the image, which is MySQL. Okay, it doesn't find the image on our system, so it pulls it from Docker Hub. Okay, and then if we do a Docker container ls or Docker ps, it shows us that we have MySQL running here. And if you want to stop these without removing them, you can simply say docker container stop, and the name, we'll say MySQL, and it'll stop. And if I do a docker ps, we don't see it, but if we do a -a, that shows all of our containers, even if they're not running, and that shows the MySQL. All right, so let's see. Next thing I want to do, oh, and if you want to remove an image, remove a container that's actually running, you can do docker. Let's actually remove our Apache. So we'll say docker container remove, and then say my Apache. Now watch what happens when I do this. It's going to tell me that I can't remove a running container. It tells us that we have to use force. Okay, we have to, before attempting removal, or force remove. And the way that we force remove is just adding a -f, and that will remove it. So now if I do a docker ps, I'll even leave the a in there, you can see that it's completely gone. Okay, let's see. So now what I want to do is talk about something that is probably on your mind, and that's how do we actually edit files, like in our container, on our server, on our Nginx server. How do we edit files? Well, you do that through something called a volume or bind mount. But before we get to that, I want to show you that you can actually enter your container. Okay, so you can bash into an Nginx container. So let's do that real quick. So let's see. What I called it my Nginx, so I'm going to say docker, let's see, docker container, and we want to run exec, and we want to add the interactive flag here, it, and my Nginx is what I called it, and then we just want to say bash at the end because we want to bash into it. All right, so now you see that we have this root at, and then whatever the container ID is, and if I do an ls, then you'll see all the folders here. All right, and as I showed you before, Nginx is based from the Debian image, so that's basically its operating environment. Now with Nginx, the web root is going to be in user/share/Nginx. So I'm just going to cd into this Nginx/html. And if I do an ls, you'll see the index.html. That's what we're seeing. It's port 8080, right? That's what we're seeing right here. Now, how do we change this to whatever, our home page? Now, of course, you could edit it from within here, but that's not really a good idea. You want to create a volume to basically map this area to an area on your local file system. Okay, so I'm going to exit out of this container with exit. You see that now I'm back out. And notice that I'm in a folder called test on my local system. Okay, there's nothing in here. And I'm going to, let's see, I'm actually going to remove that container real quick. Actually, I'll show you how to remove all containers. And if we go to this gist here, and I have the link in the description to this gist, it has a lot of the commands that we've been dealing with, plus a bunch of other stuff. I can't remember if I showed you this at the beginning of the video, but I use this as a reference all the time. So right here, you can remove multiple containers. To remove all containers, you can use this command right here. So I'm going to just grab that and paste that in. And if any of these are running, you'll get an error unless you add the -f. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and now that deleted all the containers on the system. Okay, so we have no containers. So I want to create a new container, but I want to add basically what's called a bind mount. Okay, so I'm going to say docker container run. Let's do detached. Let's do ports. We'll say 8080 again to 80. And then we're going to do a -v here. Okay, so this is where we want to put the area on our local machine that we want, and we want to map it to an area in the container, which is going to be the web root that I just showed you. Now there's a shortcut we can use for the current directory that we're in, and that's $parentheses with pwd inside. So that basically is telling it we want the directory that we're in right now. And this might not work on Windows. As you'll see in here, let's see, we want to go down to, and this can get a little confusing. This is like my own personal reference, so it's not really, I didn't make it easy to read. So this is what we're doing, but I thought I had an example to do it without that. But you'll basically have to do like from your C drive, C:/ and then to wherever your location is. I guess I don't have it here. I thought I did. Oh well. Alright, so yeah, that might not work on Windows. Oh, another thing I wanted to mention is when you bash into Nginx like we just did, if you're using git bash on Windows, you might have to use a command before Docker called right here, winpty. So you might have to add that if you're using git bash on Windows. PowerShell should be okay, but I think that you might have to use that on git bash. Anyways, let's get back to this. So we want this to basically bind to /usr/share/nginx/html. And then let's give it a name of, we'll say nginx-website. And then, of course, we need the actual image, which is nginx. So let's run that. All right. Now, if I ls in my test directory, there's nothing here, but I should be able to overwrite that index.html file and add other files if I want. So I'm going to actually open up my Visual Studio Code text editor in this directory that we're currently in. Okay, and I'm going to create a file called index.html and just add some basic HTML boilerplate to it. We'll just say hello world. Hello world, and save. And then let's go back to Chrome. Let's go to our Nginx server and reload. And there we go. So we've taken the index.html, and this is now showing here because of the bind mount that we created from the local file system to inside the container. And I could even create another file, we'll call it about.html, and just copy everything here, paste that in, and let's just do about. And save and go back to Chrome, and now if we go to localhost 8080/about.html, we get about. Okay, so we basically have access to the web root that's inside of our container through this test directory, okay, or whatever directory you set it as. So now what I want to do excuse me, is create a Dockerfile so that we can create an image from this application. So I'm going to, let's see, create a new file, uppercase D, Dockerfile, not .dockerfile, so don't put a dot in front of it. And in here, this is going to actually be very simple. We first want to put a from. Remember the Nginx had from Debian. We're actually going to do from Nginx. Okay, so we get everything that comes with that Nginx image, and we want to add the tag of latest. Okay, so I want the latest version, and then I'm going to add a work directory, and we want the work directory to be the web root, which is going to be that user/share/nginx/html. All right, now I have an index and an about HTML page here. I actually want to when we build this image, I want this to get added. So I'm going to use the copy command. I'm going to say copy dot, so all to all. So copy everything from here to the image. All right, so let's save this. And now we want to build our image based on this Docker file. So let's go ahead and let's go back to our, I was going to use the integrated terminal, but I'll just go back to this. Okay, and let's see, we want to use Docker image build. So we'll say Docker image build, and then we want to add the -t flag and then name it. Now, I'm actually going to show you guys how to push this to Docker Hub to your account. So if you want to do that, you want to put your username. Actually, mine is Traversy. And then I'll do /nginx website, or yeah, I guess that's fine. Webbyte or Westbyte website. And then dot, which is going to refer to the Docker file that's in this particular folder that we're in. All right, so let's run that, and that should build out the image. Okay, so it looks like everything went okay, successfully built. And now if we do Docker images, you'll see Traversy /nginx website as an image. Okay, it has an ID and everything. So we can now build from that, or create a container from that. So I'm going to clear this out. And let's get rid of our original container that we have. If we say Docker container ls, we have this Nginx website. We didn't have to create this in order to create our Dockerfile and create and build that image. I was just using this as an example. So let's actually remove this. So we'll say Docker our container. Actually, we don't even have to use container. It's just good practice. We should be able to do rm and then nginx website force, and it should delete it. So now if we look at our containers, it's not there. All right, so now let's build a container based on that Traversy nginx image. So we'll say Docker container run detach port. Let's do a different port. Let's do 80. We'll do 8082 map to port 80, and let's see. We'll do. I'm not even going to do a bind mount. Let's just do the image, which is Traversy /nginx website. Okay, so if we do a docker ps, you can see that that's up and running on 8082, and if everything went okay, then 8082 should show the hello world page. So let's go localhost 8082, and there we go. All right, so we now have our image. We should also be able to go to about.html because that is in the container. Okay, when we created our Dockerfile, we copied those files into the container. So the last thing I want to do for this video is push this image to Docker Hub. Okay, you can see if I go to my dashboard, I don't have any images here currently, but I can easily push this image here if I want, and then I could grab it from any computer in the world. So let's go back to our terminal here, and let's do, let's see, Docker push, and then we just want to push Traversy /nginx website. It's going to push to the Docker Hub repo. And by the way, if you get a message about authentication, just do Docker login, okay, and that will authenticate you. So let's go ahead over here and reload, and there it is, Traversy nginx website. Okay, and you can add descriptions and stuff like that if you want here, and it shows you how to pull it. So I could go to any computer that I want, any server, anything, anywhere, and just run this. Okay, as long as Docker is installed, this will pull this website down. And I mean, this is obviously just a stupid little sample website, but imagine if this was a very large application. Now in the next video, we're going to get a little more advanced. I want to talk about Docker Compose, which allows us to do things much quicker and allows us to do a lot more. If you want to use multiple containers and, for instance, have a database in one container, have your Node.js in one container, whatever it may be, you can do that really easily. So that's what we're going to do in the next video, guys. Hopefully you liked this one. If you did, please leave it a like, and I'll see you in the next one.